Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our program this evening. I'm Stephanie Gaspar, president of Kissimmee Valley Audubon Society, and appreciate everyone watching our program. Last month, Dr. Jason Fisher spoke to us about Disney conservation efforts, which focus on protecting wildlife around the world. The program focused on the endangered Siberian crane in Asia, and Jason also updated us with his work with the Purple Martins at Disney. It was a great program, and I recommend folks go back and watch it along with any other programs they may have missed. Stay tuned for announcements for next month's speaker. It will also be the last program of the season until we resume again in September. Stay up to date with our programs by checking out our website, following us on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Before we begin, I would like to mention a few housekeeping items. Log into YouTube and type any questions you have in the chat. We will answer questions throughout the presentation as well as at the end. Additionally, we may have internet connection issues this evening, so if we lose the stream, please be patient and I'll get it up and running again. This evening, I am pleased to present our guest speaker, Paul Eisenbrown. He works in the biology department at Valencia College West. During his free time, he likes to travel around Central Florida to see the amazing sights and captures them with amazing photography. Eagles are one of his favorite subjects, and we will certainly see them as well tonight. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Paul. I will now pass it over to you.
All right. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody's had a good day and hope you enjoy the show. So we'll just start right into it. As Stephanie said, I spend a lot of time in the Kissimmee Valley area. I've always liked that throughout the years. And that's primarily where I hike, take pictures, and observe wildlife. And what I've done this evening is I've put together some species, some of them very common that you see all the time with some interesting facts about them. This particular slide that you see right now is a nest that doesn't exist anymore. We used to call it the Grant Bass Nest of Keenanville, and it was a great photo opportunity and a great place to observe the habits of the eagle. But the tree died, and eventually a storm came and knocked the tree over, and it doesn't exist anymore. This, by the way, it took me several times to get this eagle to come right at me. I had a tripod and it took several different days, but finally once he flew right at me over my head. And one of the things I've done also today is most of the photos are cropped in these presentations. So occasionally I'll show you the actual shot from the camera, and the settings will be down here also. I know as a photographer, I'm always interested in how other people set up their cameras. There are different ways to achieve the same result. So you'll see that. Now, before we get into any kind of bird life, it takes a second for this to kick in. I was riding my bicycle on a lunch break, and I ran into these gopher tortoises struggling with each other. Maybe it's not going to do it tonight. Oh, here we go. So I thought I'd throw in something about gopher tortoises. You have them in your area, but as you can see, it's like a tug of war here, or just the opposite. They're pushing each other. When gopher tortoises have territorial disputes or whatever other dispute they have, they try to turn the one over on its back and make it helpless. Now, I didn't have time to wait for the results, but about gopher tortoises. One is very much larger than the other, but the little guy is exerting quite some effort. So gopher tortoises, this is from a local park by me. Gopher tortoises like scrub and sandhill habitat, which of course is great for building buildings and houses. So their habitat is being diminished as many other species are running into the same problem. they have burrows in the ground. And people always ask, well, how deep do they dig? And gopher tortoises dig to the water table. So some can be quite lengthy burrows and some can be very close to the surface. They're plant eaters. And in Shadow Bay Park, what's interesting is we have the wild plum trees. And when the fruit turns yellow and drops to the ground, these gopher tortoises know where to go to have some nice fruit. In the wild, they live to be 40, as you saw earlier. And anyway, that's a brief explanation about gopher tortoises. Here's the area that I hang out in, which is pretty familiar if you're members. If you're not a member, you'll learn something new. But here's 192. Here's Canoe Creek Road, which comes down to 441. And it kind of parallels the Florida Turnpike. This is where I spend most of my time. Along the road itself, once you get out of civilization, you see eagles, caracaras, deer, other wildlife, maybe a bobcat will cross the road. But I'll point out a couple of areas. Lake Cypress Road, because of the new attraction Wild Florida, I don't travel this road anymore. Sundays are closed. So that's about the only way to view the wildlife down there before you get to the attraction. And as you leave the intersection here, you cross a big canal. Well, that big canal is Canoe Creek. So at one time, it probably was a nice meandering creek. But of course, like all the other lakes adjoined here, everything is joined with canals and structures to control the water levels. You go a little further down the road and there's a turn to Overstreet Landing. There's a 5-mile road that takes you to Joe Overstreet, to the landing, the Joe Overstreet Road. If you drive slowly on this road, it's another good place to observe wildlife. And when you get to the landing, there's a viewing platform there, which is excellent for seeing the birds that fly in and out, and also photographing the shorebirds that are in the area. Once you leave there, you come to Prairie Lakes, which is part of 3 lakes. It's a limited hunting area, so it's a good place to go to. They have 2 very nice 6-mile hiking trails where you start and end at the same place, loop trails. Plus, along the road, there's a lot of places here to see wildlife. Now, the place that a lot of people don't go to, which I didn't circle on the map, but just about 2 miles south of Prairie Lakes Turnoff, is a Sunset Ranch Interpretive Trail. It's about a 1-mile trip to Lake Marion and a 1-mile trip back. There's no hunting in there, so you do see deer and turkey. And when you get to the end of the lake, there's a nice viewing platform there. And you should learn to spend some time in this area, because particularly now with the young eagles fledging, you get to see them interacting with the adults on the lake, and they land in the cypress trees right next to the end of the platform. There's also a large bat house there, although the last time I was there, there were no bats. You can also see the pens covered where they first introduced the whooping cranes years ago. You go down a little further to the little town Kenansville. There's a public boat ramp in Lake Marion. This is also an excellent place for birding. So there's where I go. There are places to go.
Sorry to interrupt you, Paul. I have a question. So these are wonderful, amazing places. And for folks who haven't been out here, are they free to the public, or is there some cost to get into them?
The cost of gasoline.
Okay.
They're all free. They're all public. They're all public places. I take that back. To get into Prairie Lakes or 3 lakes, there is a $3 per person or $6 per car fee there. Or if you're over 65, it's free. But other than that, every place else is free.
Excellent. Thanks for letting us know.
Okay. All right. Sandhill Cranes. We have a lot of those in Osceola County. We actually have two subspecies in Osceola County. There's a permanent flock year-round that lives here and nests here. And then there's a migrating flock from the Michigan Great Lakes area. And they only come for the winter and they go back home to migrate. Outside of the whooping crane, they're probably the tallest bird we have in North America. And here's a whooping crane right here, which we don't see anymore at the Double C Bar Ranch outside of Jover Street Road where you turn. But they're a good head taller, like 6 inches, and their wingspan is a good a good foot longer. And I don't know if that's a apples to apples comparison, but you have to look at if the bird was standing up like this next to this one, the whooping crane would look much larger. This is one landing. They have a mating dance, which I'm sorry, I don't have any photographs of. The times I've seen it, I wasn't into photography, where they jump up and down, and it's really quite interesting to see. They lay 2 eggs each year, and it takes about 32 days to incubate. And the young are expected to be ready to walk within 24 hours after they hatch. And these birds are omnivorous. Now, a few years ago, I always thought these sandhill cranes only ate seeds and bugs in the ground and roots and things like that, until I was at Overstreet Landing one day, and there was a parent limpkin with 4 or 5 young. And as soon as the sandhill crane saw that, it went over there and scarfed one up. And it would have eaten more if the limpkin didn't take charge and run back into the marsh. The young will stay with the adults, some of them almost up to the year. But once they start breeding again, the young ones are on their own. They mate for life. So here we are. They like marshy areas, shallow waters. They'll just pick a place, however they do that, and they'll just start with the grass in the ground, pulling it up and piling it up until they get the what they like. Like I say, they typically lay 2 eggs, but some will lay more. They incubate, and they both parents share incubation duties. And then once they're hatched, these are about a day old, and they'll be walking soon. The parents, even though they're very long-legged, the young ones have to keep up. And these are probably a week and a half to 2 weeks old right here. Caracaras. This is a cool bird. They're kind of like, to me, little muscular eagles. The population in Florida is an isolated population, by the way, and the range normally is from 192 down to Okeechobee, Lake Okeechobee, below it and around it. However, I know some have been seen in Seminole County, so I'm not up on all the northern progression of these birds, but they have been seen up in Seminole County. They are members of the falcon family, so they can certainly catch their prey as any raptor, but like a lot of birds, they like the easy prey that the cars give us with roadkill. So you see these all along Canoe Creek Road, and you just have to be careful when you stop to look at these or photograph them, make sure there's not a large truck coming towards you or behind you. The bulge here is a crop, which birds have, which is an expansion of the esophagus, is where they store their food for energy later on. And we're probably going to talk a little bit more about these. One other thing about the caracaras, because they are an isolated, there have been a lot of studies done with them, and it's genetic studies, and it's soon they may be designated a subspecies. Here's
Uh,
Caracara. Yes.
Paul, I have another question in regards to the caracaras. So, were they more widespread in the Kissimmee Valley and throughout Central Florida, or have they always been in a small pocket population?
Well, I'll tell you, they were more widespread before the water levels, once we went through ice ages and water level changes. So they were probably linked at one time to other caracaras, but there's no other link except Florida. As far as I know, they aren't in Georgia or Mississippi. You have to go all the way to the Southwest to see them. So somewhere in geologic history, they were separated. And I know that because I'll introduce you to a person who studies these birds, a Dr. Joan Morrison. So I've listened to some of her talks, and she has some videos which I've put in the references below. But as far
Excellent.
as our birds, they're isolated. If somebody knows differently, I'm not aware of anything. No.
All right. Thank you.
Here's an immature one. It takes about 3 years for them to gain their adult plumage. Now this one, they nest in cabbage palm trees. Now I've noticed this one tree along Canoe Creek Road that they go into, and I assume, there's a nest in there. I've never spent a lot of time there. So maybe one year I'll spend time observing that tree, but that's one of their favorite nesting trees. When I look up into the nest from the bottom, it's hard to tell if there is a nest at all. But the way you can tell, by the way, is like owls, they regurgitate their leftover food. They regurgitate these fur balls, as we should call them with owls. But you can look to the bottom of the tree, and if you find these around it, that's an indication if there's a nest in the tree. Banding. Banding is very important, as most of y'all know. It gives us great information about migration ranges of birds, where they travel. And when you have a band, you don't have to have a photograph. If you've taken one down through looking through binoculars, or even I've known people have found dead birds with bands on them, they should be reported. And you can report them to band reports at usgs.gov, U.S. Geological Survey. And I had reported this caracara that I photographed off Deer Park Road over by Doxy Groves, if anybody knows where that is. Some of you probably do, in the Mormon Ranch territory. And when I sent it in, it got a notice from a Dr. Joan Morrison, who has studied caracaras in Florida over 20 years. And through it, I learned a lot about the caracara, but I was also able to get this photograph of the bird before it was released. This is, at the time, was her graduate student, James Dwyer. It was on the Peavine Road. And for some reason, over the years, it had traveled 28 miles up to Deer Park Road. So here is the banded bird released. It turned out the bird was about 15 years old. Now that's not a record for caracaras, but I felt good about it because I learned a lot about the caracara that I didn't know before. And here are just some shots. Some of these are older. This one I just took the 20th. Kenansville public boat ramp on the side of the road as I approached the boat ramp. Now, before I do that, I want to go back to, at the end, I have 3 videos in the references, like I said, and they'll explain to you about the caracara and about the studies being done. One was from Orange Audubon, which they had for their keynote speaker at their North Shore Birding Festival. In fact, they had Dr. Joan Morrison do the keynote speaking. There's 2 other shorter videos. One just recent, it was just posted in March and done in February at Archbold biological station, and it talks about the possibility of this being a subspecies of its own in Florida. So at the end, you can take a snapshot of that if you like. I'll hold it up. This is a very pretty bird, center-tailed flycatcher. They migrate from Central America and South America, and there's a pair that comes to Joe Overstreet Road to the Corral area. And anybody that, there are a lot of people that try to photograph these birds. So they're on the telephone wires and they're on the fences. They've since left now, so they're not there anymore for this particular season. But they're beautiful birds. And I felt fortunate in this photograph that I got one not on a fence or not in front of a fence. Because most of the time over here, you see them in the fence. And when they're flying, they have tremendous colors, the red and the wing and the orange, and when the tail spreads out. And it's not a very large bird. It has a lengthy tail, can get up to 14 inches total length, but it's a very small bird. Sometimes they hover in the air as they're seeking their prey, the insect, and then they'll go down and catch it. These are just shots of hovering. There's the original shot, just to show comparison. And by the way, I'm shooting through a hog wire fence here. So the fencing doesn't really show up when I use a telephoto lens, but it's there. And again, there's the original shot before any cropping. And I'm, maybe some of y'all will have to tell me, but I believe this is the female because it's not quite as colorful as the other one I've been showing.
Paul, I was going to,
yeah.
Sorry, I was going to ask you in regards to the male and female of the flycatchers, if the tail is longer on the males than the females.
I do not know. Maybe one of your viewers can knows, but I do not know.
Okay, yes, if anyone does know that, type it in the chat.
When I've seen them side by side on the fence, the tail feathers look about the same to me, but I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
All right, anhingas. Yeah, just interrupt anytime here. I know we have a limited time and I'm trying to get through everything that I can. I was photographing this eagle about a week ago, actually, and I didn't pay attention to the anhinga that was down here. I didn't see that until I got it on my computer screen. So we are going to talk about anhingas. But as you can see from the viewing platform at Overstreet Landing, you can get at eye level with these eagles as they fly by in front of it. Anhingas are also called snake birds because often you only see the neck above the water, and they're always moving their neck. They're rarely, they may sit still with the rest of their body, but they're always twisting and turning with their neck. They swim underwater and they spear their fish with the beak, and then they come up and somehow they're able to flip the fish in the air and swallow it head first. One interesting thing about the anhinga is it has completely wettable feathers. So it just gets soaked. It allows it to stay underwater and fish. So it has no thermal protection once it's underwater. And it can only spend so much time in the water before it has to come up on land or on a tree or somewhere on a post. And people think it's just drying its wings, which it does that, but it's actual thermal regulating to get its body temperature back up. So the northern range of these are tropic and subtropic birds, which you find in Florida and sometimes the lower portion of some of the states adjacent to Florida. You don't see these up north anywhere because of their body metabolism. And sometimes they come up on shore. It seems like they're able to swallow these fish much bigger than you think they can. Now, its counterpart, the cormorant, also swims underwater and catches fish, but it doesn't spear them, of course. It has to get them in its beak, and it does the same thing. It comes up, and these birds can really swallow big fish. One of the differences in the two, and I'll try and be as simple as I can with this because I have a simple understanding of this. They have two-sided feathers, a wettable side and a non-wettable side. So they have a non-wettable side against their body, which is able to trap air and keeps their body temperature regular underwater. And so that's all I know about this. I read several studies, one with MIT, where they really studied these birds. But it was very interesting to learn about these two different animals. So it can shed water like it does here on one side, and it's wettable on the other. Snail kites. Snail kites is probably one of the more endangered birds we have here in Florida. They eat snails. And as far as I know, they only eat snails. I don't know if they're like other birds and they have other things they eat when they can't find snails. But as far as I know, they only eat snails. This is a male. They fly over the areas, and once they see a snail, they'll go down and get it and bring it up and take it to a perch and begin to eat it. Now this snail you see is above the water. Most of the time the snails are below the surface, attached to one of these lily pads or some water plant below a few inches. But this particular snails have both lungs and gills. The genus of these have both lungs and gills. So it only takes a little air in the lungs and these snails will float. While it's in the air, by the way, this is not the same bird. But it's what happens normally in a sequence. They'll switch the snail to their beak as they take it to the perch so they can land. And also, a snail has a trap door called an operculum. So they'll pry that open sometimes in midair before they land, so they're ready to eat. And these are heavily banded birds. There's a team of coordination team out of the University of Florida that does nothing but track snail kites throughout the state. So you'll see many, many bands on these. And when we had talked about banding earlier, I had reported one that was banded at Lake Hohokaliga. The next year it was seen at Lake Okeechobee, and the year I saw it, it was at Lake Kissimmee. So, by the way, when you, I forgot to mention, when you send in information, they will send you an online certificate telling you where the bird was banded, any useful information about it, who banded it, and whether they could tell if it's a male or female. So you get these little certificates and it's kind of cool, you know? So always report banded birds. This is a male. The rest are females. Like other birds, the females are more camouflage, but you can see they're going at prying open these snails. And look at that, there you go, there's escargot sushi.
I have a question, Paul.
Yes.
Have you noticed in all your years of photography that there's been an increase in the population of snail kites?
Well, I don't know that I've been able to determine that myself, but I know they have increased. You know, they decreased about the time that the Kissimmee River was channelized and we lost a lot of the swamp area. But I remember going to a presentation at your chapter a couple of years ago where an FWC person came and talked about snail kites. The whole program was on that. And as far as I know, they have increased, but whether they're steady now or still increasing. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Yes, from what I heard, they are, and they are spreading to other areas that they haven't really been seen, such as in the Gainesville area. So it's great that they are expanding their range, and they make great subjects if you could get them on film.
Yes. And these little birds right here, as you've probably seen with owls and hawks and eagles, they're these small birds, mockingbirds, grackles, red-winged blackbirds. They aren't afraid to chase these birds away. And these little birds have ruined many a shot. The snail kite will try and land and eat and try to get a landing shot, and they will chase them away. But anyway, I just thought this one turned out, just the expression on the snail kite from getting followed, and it was probably pecked up here by these red-winged blackbirds. They're ferocious at defending their territory. Now the snails. I'm not a snail expert, but these snails that the birds are eating now are exotic. There is a native apple snail, and I can't say that I've seen one in years. And I'm not sure I would recognize one other than they're smaller, and they lay white eggs at about 100. These snails lay about 2,000 eggs, and these can get as big as tennis balls, and sometimes as baseballs. They're very large. They eat plant material. Sometimes they help out when they eat the hydrilla, but sometimes, a lot of times, they eat native plant life and can pretty much ruin certain areas of native Florida vegetation. So again, this is the genus Pomacea, and the apple snail, the native apple snail is the genus Pomacea also. Remember, they have lungs and gills. And this, I believe, is the island apple snail, but again, I'm not a snail expert. But there's a lot of these things, and every time you see these pink eggs, that's one of the exotic snails. You can thank the aquarium business. Somehow they got released from the aquarium business, and like any exotic species, Florida is a great place to live, and they multiply. Limpkins, they also rely on the snails, but they have to poke the operculum. They stab them with their beak to break the operculum. They'll reach in and get the snail, and they'll shake their head and get the meat out of the snail. In this case, we have parents feeding the young. They'll go out in the water and they'll feel these snails with their feet, or they'll duck their head down and try and find one also. Now, they also eat freshwater mussels. At the park, I showed the gopher tortoise. They have freshwater mussels, and even in Prairie Lakes unit that I mentioned, there's a creek that crosses the road. There's a water structure you cross and you drive in about a mile, and you'll find little piles of the freshwater mussels there when the limpkins are there. They don't have a lot of limpkins in that area, but they do eat the freshwater mussels there also. More harassment. These two limpkins are actually fighting, but like a lot of birds, their beak determines their demeanor sometimes. Like an eagle always looks like it's mean. An eagle never smiles, they say. For some reason, to me, even though they're fighting, it looks to me like they're having fun, but they can't help it because of their beak. Anyway, just a thought I had. Swallowtail kites. They come to us in February and March, and they leave in August and September. And I actually saw a pair going down the highway, Florida Turnpike over by the 192 exit this weekend. So I was trying to get a photograph of one earlier, but I hadn't seen them before that. I knew they were in South Florida. So maybe some of you have already seen them and commented if you've seen them in the area, but they're back up here now based on the two that I've seen. They're beautiful flying birds effortlessly. They almost look like they don't flap their wings at all. They come up here to roost and then go back home to South America. And there are roosting places which I've never been to, like on the St. Johns River. And there's another place in Winter Park on an abandoned golf course where they congregate, but I don't think they roost there. So maybe one day I'll visit one of those locations. They'll eat insects, frogs. They'll take baby birds out of nests. They're opportunistic feeders. And when they're in the air for the day, they spend most of their time in the air. This one's preening itself in the air. This is off Canoe Creek Road. There was a hayfield. Now in Florida, Bahia grass is hay. They just grow it longer, and it's not the same hay that you have out west. But the birds were swooping down into this field and catching insects. And I used this picture because there was a tractor that was also mowing the hay down at the same time. And by the time I got my photographs, the hay was gone. And there you go. And this all happens very fast. It's real challenging photography. And I hope to go back to this place this year and hope that they'll do it again. That's not the same bird. That's a different bird. I just showed it eating in the air. Now, you notice an insect at the top of your screen. I can't see the insect here because of this menu that I have above, but there's an insect, and you can see this snail kite, or swallowtail kite, I'm sorry. Did I say snail kite before? Anyway, these are swallowtail kites. He's keying in on this insect, and you can see his feet, which are normally tucked up against the body when they fly, are coming forward. As he gets closer, you see the feet getting ready to grab it. And there you go. That's another one of those photographs. I was photographing the swallowtail kite, and I discovered the insect afterwards. Purple gallinules. These are beautiful birds. When the right amount of sun, that iridescent glow to them, and they're spectacular to watch. They have big feet. They're not ducks, by the way. They're part of the rail family, even though they live in the water, and they are able to swim a little bit, but not like a duck. This is a mature one. They travel on lily pads. They eat plant materials. They like these unopened buds of the water lilies. They'll eat seeds. I've seen them eat crayfish. I watched one eat a baby purple gallinule from another group. So they can be quite mean sometimes also. Again, when the sun hits them, they're just spectacular. And here's one with an open flower of the lily pad.
Excuse me, Paul.
This is a swan. Yes.
Where can you generally see the purple gallinules? Because they are sometimes quite rare. So where do you recommend people go to see them?
Well, I see most of these at Overstreet Landing. But there are people that tell me, again, because I go to these places the same, your audience probably has a place. But if you go to like Lakeland, I believe Lake Morris, the lake in Lakeland, where they are very common and you see great numbers of them and you can get photographs of them. So maybe your audience can chime in and say where they see them. But I photograph most of mine in Lake Kissimmee at Overstreet and at Lake Marion and a little south of there that I already mentioned.
Thank you.
This is a called a swamp hen. It's not native to Florida. It broke out when a hurricane came through in 1992, and a lot of them were kept in pens, and they were released in the wild, and they have survived like many other species that I've talked about earlier. They're 2 to 3 times larger than a normal purple gallinule. They're native to India and Pakistan and China. But they are now up in our area. I've seen them at Lake Apopka, and this one was taken at the headwaters marsh off the Fellsmere Grade, which is where the stick marsh is. For those that photograph spoonbills at the stick marsh, it's in that area, and there were quite a few there. I don't know their complete range. Now we get to the common gallinule, which we see a lot of, and here it is. The coloration is different. I guess you can't have a nature show without an alligator in Florida. So on the right, this is Lake Kissimmee, chain pickerel. The one on the left is at the B-Bar Reserve in Polk County. They have big alligators there, but this was a huge Florida snapping turtle and a huge alligator. And I just thought I'd show that. I mean, it's not a nice picture to see, but it's life and nature. A bobcat. I don't see many of these, but I know there are other people that know where to look for them because I see them posted quite regularly on some sites. This one crossed the road in front of me on Canoe Creek Road, and it paused and looked back, and I just got my camera and shot it. They're not quite as dark as this, but that's the first bobcat I've seen in a long time. Deer. You see these quite regularly on Canoe Creek Road, Joe Overstreet Road, in Prairie Lakes area. Usually you can drive by at a normal speed. They don't bat an eye, but as soon as you slow down, they lift their heads. They know the difference between cruising speed and stopping speed, probably because they are hunted. The buck up above here, if you'll notice the antlers, it has a velvety skin around it. Deer loses its antlers every year, and then they grow back the next year on the buck, and they usually grow back larger each year. The velvet is just skin enclosed while the growth period is occurring, and the deer will rub those against a tree to get the bony antlers that you're accustomed to. Our white-tailed deer are very small compared to other deer. Florida has its own species of wild turkey, Osceola, and they're quite beautiful. Like when you get the right light on them. These are all sporting their Sunday best, looking for the hens. And here's another species that I really didn't understand when I first saw one. They kept telling me the toms have beards. I know this is a simple thing, but you learn things this way. So I kept looking for a beard up here around the neck, and then realizing here right in front of my face, the beard is down here. The beard is not here, it's modified feathers. And the longer the beard, the greater the trophy it is for the hunter. Kingfisher. This is a small bird also. It hovers in the air, or sometimes it goes directly from a tree or a telephone wire. It's after a fish, or dives completely submerged underwater, pops up, and then heads to wherever it's going to eat the fish. Sometimes the fish of this size will swallow that, but it'll beat it against the limb of a tree or a post to kill it before it swallows it. Otters. I haven't seen these in a long time. These two are from Overstreet Landing, but it's been a couple of years. This one is from Valencia College where I work. We used to have them fairly regularly there. And again, I have to defer to the audience as to where you see these now. I'm told that the Orlando Wetlands Preserve is a good place to see them occasionally. But I haven't seen these at Overstreet Landing in a long time.
Hi, Paul.
Yes.
I did want to mention that where I live in Kissimmee, it is right in the Kissimmee city limits by downtown Kissimmee. And I live near the canal that drains into Lake Toho. And I see them, little groups of them playing in the waterway canal by my house.
Okay.
And they go in and out and in the retention ponds. So that's pretty fun because one time a family was running down the street in my neighborhood. So like a mother with the pups, I think they're called pups. So I thought that was an odd sight, but they are around even in the residential areas.
And you'll find them sometimes. I had a friend who had some in their swimming pool one morning. So, but they do travel a lot. Well, that's
Wow.
good, you know. I'm glad that you're seeing them. They're quite, like you say, they're fun to
Yes,
watch.
definitely.
This is the Southeastern Fox Squirrel. It used to be called the Sherman Fox Squirrel, but it's been lumped together now with the Southeastern Fox Squirrel. And it's much larger than the regular gray squirrel that we have. When you get further north, a lot of the fox squirrels are more of a reddish color. This was taken on, actually, these are two different locations. Joe Overstreet Road. These were taken at trees right at the Overstreet Landing Marina. And I was thinking the other day, whenever I see these fox squirrels, I've never seen two of them together. I've only seen one. So I know at some point in time there have to be two together, and but maybe one day I'll get to photograph two of them together. But they seem like loners most of the time. You never know what you're going to see when you're out there. Northern harriers come down here for the winter. They fly low across the pastures and prairie areas looking for small mammals, rodents. These are the females. The male is a silver gray, and you don't see so many of those. I've seen them, but I've never gotten a good photograph of one. This is a glossy ibis. This is another bird that when the sun hits it right and the plumage in the right time of year has great colors. And even though this one is not flying, it's flying, you can see the colors. And then I like the layers of the feathering here. They spend a lot of time actually in pastures in Joe Overstreet Road and by Overstreet Landing. There are some that come to the marina, but it just seems like they're more of a field bird in certain areas. Green heron. This is another cool bird. You know, look at that hairdo. Stretches its neck out. So it's amazing. They have these precarious perches all the time. You know, they all of a sudden they don't look like a long-necked bird. They can stretch it out, and sometimes they lose their footing and go into the water right behind their catch. Again, here's another unusual situation. This is at the same little park I talked about in Orange County, Shadow Bay Park. Some of your smaller birds. This is a red-headed woodpecker. And I know I'm being simple here, but a lot of people think that this is a red-headed woodpecker. This is a red-bellied woodpecker, and they have a reddish-orange spot on its belly. And since it's facing the tree a lot, you don't see it so much. Bluebird, I just took that photograph last week, and great crested flycatcher. So there's an opportunity. This is on Joe Overstreet Road, and these three birds right here were photographed on the same tree at different places. There's a nice little pine forest as you enter Overstreet Road from Canoe Creek Road on the right, where there's opportunities to photograph these birds. And by the way, one of those fox squirrel photographs was also in this same area. I like this. Instead of bringing one insect back at a time, it brought a whole passel of them there. I don't know how it stacks those things like that, but I thought that was interesting. All right, bald eagle. Stephanie, we're doing all right on time?
You're doing great, Paul. No worries about the time.
Okay. All right, bald eagles, these are my favorite. We're in the middle of eagle season right now in Florida. Eagle season is between mid-October and mid-May. That's when they come to Florida. Actually, we have permanent eagles that some of them stay here year-round or only go away for a short distance. But eagle season is when they get together, mating, nest building, egg laying, hatching, and fledging, which we'll go through. But an eagle is not bald. It comes from Old English or Middle English, and it means white or a white patch. So that's why they're called bald eagles. They mate for life, and they'll pick up a new mate if one of the partners dies or leaves for some reason. And Florida has one of the larger populations of eagles. Alaska has by far the most eagles of any place. And every state has a bald eagle. I didn't know that for a while, except Hawaii. So maybe a hurricane will blow one into Hawaii and we'll have all 50 states. It takes about 5 years for them to develop their white tail and white adult plumage. The female is noticeably larger than the male. The male in Florida here is 6 to 10 pounds, 8 to 12 pounds, and that can vary also. And the female is probably a good 6 inches taller than the male. They live 15 to 20 years in the wild, 40 or more years in captivity, and they can carry 4 or more pounds for a short distance. That's quite a struggle for an eagle. Now, one of the rituals, the female chooses their mate, and once they get together, they do a lot of flying, and at some point they lock talons and spiral to just before they hit the ground or a tree and separate. Sometimes they hit the ground, and sometimes they don't get up. Now, it's also not just a mating ritual. 2 males will also do this, I guess, testing each other. But when you see it one day, I hope to get a little closer to get some good shots of it. But I was out on Lake Marion in a pontoon boat with a friend, and he spotted them, and we just turned around and fired away. And we were fortunate to come up with photographs that we did. And the young practice this all the time. You'll see this now when their fledging is occurring. They fly upside down, all kinds of positions. And anyway, in the animal world, play is a precursor to real life situations. When an eagle lays its egg, it lays 1 egg at a time, by the way. An eagle traditionally lays 2 eggs, and there can be 1 to several days apart. They incubate for 35 days, give or take, and the male and female share the incubation duties. much like the Sandhill Crane, although I have to tell you, the males don't like to hang around as much, and the female gets most of the egg-laying duty. Sometimes you can't even see the eagle on eggs, depending upon how high the nest is and how deep the nest is. This happens to be a lower nest and a shallow nest where you have good visibility. When they hatch, this particular one, they only had one young. I don't know if there was another egg or not, or anyway, they only had one young that survived if there were more. And right away, they're fed carrion directly. They don't, the bald eagles don't chew and regurgitate their carrion to the young. They start feeding them directly for it. So here's a shot. There it is at a distance. Now, one other thing, you know, when you're using a 500 millimeter lens, that's probably equivalent to a 10x pair of binoculars. You know, the human eye, we see at a focal length of about 50 millimeters. So if you were looking at this nest without binoculars, you probably would not see that young bird. You would know something was happening by the activity of the parent. Here's another nest. We call this one the Renison nest off Canoe Creek Road because of the blue sign that says Renison Road. And this one much larger than this one, so this one probably hatched sooner. And in the course of feeding, it probably bullies its way in there more often than the smaller one. Now, after taking this photograph, I went by the next week and I noticed the smaller one was not there. And I asked a friend to go by and verify that. And maybe your Eagle Watch team, who I'm sure knows about this nest, can verify that also. But only something happened to this bird. It was kicked out of the nest or it died. But only this one survived, the larger one. And I took this photograph on the 13th of this month. So it has since fledged. I don't know the timeline between this bird, how long, when it was born and that kind of thing, but it has fledged now. When an eagle is getting ready to fledge, they stretch their wings, they jump up and down, they'll fly short jaunts to tree limbs within the tree, and then one day they just take off. Sometimes they just make a short run, come back to the nest. Sometimes they'll go to a nearby tree. And it's quite comical to watch, really, because they don't know how to land. So they do a lot of crash landing. This nest is that Grant Bass nest I was telling you about that no longer exists. It was a tremendous nest for watching eagle activity. And here's one coming back to the nest. The adult was eating something, looks up, all of a sudden, here's this flying obstacle coming at it. And it kind of had to move out of the way. It did a belly flop right there in the nest. But it doesn't take them long to learn how to fly. And the adults spend up to the next 2 months with the young because they still have to feed them and teach them how to feed themselves. What the eagles eat, I think the common conception is they eat fish, but that's not true. A fish will eat, an eagle will eat just about anything. The ones that nest near a lake traditionally eat fish, although they'll eat birds and ducks along with it. But some of the nests are not close to lakes, and they will eat things like cattle egrets. It's a little bit graphic, but anyway, it happens. And a lot of eagles survive just on roadkill. If you can figure out what this eagle has, this is another nest that they almost always, everything I've seen go to the nest, except on a couple of occasions, is guts of some kind. So it's either roadkill or something, and just think of the eagles that live by dumps. You know, they grow up learning to eat food at dumps. Now, these are my favorite eagles. Actually, this is back at Overstreet Landing, where we have two groups of eagles. We call them the North and the South eagles, even though it might not be exactly north and south. There's a boat dock nearby, and that seems to be the territorial point. When they get together and squawk at each other, they don't seem to cross that line very often. So these are the South eagles. And when they go out from the south side, they traditionally come back to the south side. So you wait and hope they come close enough to get a good photograph. There's a sign here, there's their favorite perch. This is a fairly recent photograph. This is an early morning shot. And I was going to end the program right here, resume normal, but I added one more slide. This is on Joe Overstreet Road. There's a nest we call the pond eagles because there's a pond right now. And this one was taking a bath, and it's a borrow pit pond. So sometimes they come out dirtier than when they go in. So that always reminds me of that song, Splish Splash, I was taking a bath. Now, here are those links to those YouTubes about the caracaras. If you want to take a screenshot or something here, these are very good. There's one long one, as I said before, done by the North Shore Birding Festival, and two short ones. And it really brings you up to date about our caracaras here in Florida. And that's it. So I don't know if there are any other questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Paul. And what I'll do is go back and put the links in our description, so then viewers could click the links to view the videos with the caracaras. So thank you for adding that. And there were no other questions, but I did want to comment that what great photography, and some of those shots, especially with the eagle catching the cattle egret, although like you said, it may be graphic, it is a part of life, such as even the gator eating the turtle. It's just the circle of life, and these things happen. So it's great that you got them on camera, though.
Sometimes you are in the right place at the right time. And I probably mess up more photographs because I don't have the right settings on my camera. So it all has to come together, you know. A photographer, we never make a mistake. It's always the lighting is bad, it was too windy. It's kind of like fishing. The fish weren't biting. So we have an excuse.
Yes. I have a quick question. Would you be able to go to the last slide with the eagles, the eagle in the water taking a bath?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, that's a great shot. And do you normally see them in the water taking a bath like this?
Actually, I've only seen this twice. This is the, other twice where I've gotten the photograph. Let's just say that. Sometimes you can't get close to them. But this one was this year, and I can't remember when I took this photograph, but we were at another nest down the road, and some fishermen came by and said, "Hey, there's an eagle in the pond." So I immediately went down there, and they were taking the bath, or it was taking a bath. And about 4 or 5 years ago, I have a shot almost identical to this in almost the same spot in the pond where the eagle was taking the bath. So twice I have been lucky enough to get the eagle taking a bath. But you just have to be there at the right time at the right place. Sometimes I'll go down to the lakeside, but you can't get close enough to them.
Ah, I see. And do you participate with the Eagle Watch program as well?
I do not. I have met many of your Eagle Watch people, particularly this year, because of a nest I watch all the time. And so, yes, and I've had discussions with them, and we trade information. And so, no, I do not participate.
Well, it's great what you're doing, capturing these amazing images of different birds. So I thank you so much for coming on our program today. And I have had comments in the chat, just great job. Thank you, Paul. So we are very happy that you are our guest speaker today. And thank you for taking the time to put these images together and give us a great presentation.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. Anytime.
You're welcome. And that's it, folks. We will see you next month. Stay tuned for the guest speaker on our Facebook and website, and we look forward to joining you then. Have a safe night, and we will see you soon. Take care.